Thank you for coming to the talk. My name is Susan, and I'm a freelancer here in New York. I've been freelancing for close to 5 years now, predominantly working in Python. And up until last year, I was doing solely individual contributor work. Right? So coming from a data background, anything from teaching to predictive modeling to model production. But recently I also found myself doing strategic work as well. I think because of the way freelancing works, it's been very fast-paced, and I've worked with more projects, which means I have more failure projects to share. And that's what I actually wanted to talk to you about from my 4 to 5 years of freelancing experience, all the projects that have failed because of scoping. I struggled quite a bit in making this particular presentation. PyDoc Gotham actually pairs you up with a speech coach to help you design and help you work on your stage presence. And when I talked to Melissa, my speech coach, she said, the more details you give, the better it is, right? Be truthful, be detailed, it will engage the audience more. But at the same time, I have to protect my client's confidentiality. So the intent here is I will stick to the truth and nothing but the truth, but there won't be any disclosure of clients, there won't be any screenshots of code this time around. If you want to talk about anything specific, I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. I think if you are a project manager in the room, if you are a TL, or you just have been a senior IC for a while, right? These lists of questions are kind of common sense for you, because no matter what kind of frameworks you use, at the end of the day, it boils down to these questions. Right, so when you're getting into a sprint planning, you get into a room with the product owner, and you say, why are we doing this in the most non-belligerent way possible? As a freelancer, my conversation is not with the product owner, but rather with my clients as well, coming in, asking them why exactly we're doing this instead of the what, right? Because most of the times, you could suss out a lot more by asking about the why and the motivation than exactly what they're building, because the why actually leads you down to a different path sometimes, because, oh, you don't actually need this. What you need is something else. Once we determine that the why and the what are aligned, talking about just the what we're delivering is not enough. I think it's also very important to talk about what we're not delivering. Right, so this is the essence of scope creep, where just because it's not mentioned in a particular sprint, just because it's not mentioned in a particular contract, doesn't mean that both sides are in alignment, that that's not what's going to be delivered. Actually explicitly writing this out in your sprint planning, or in my case, in my freelance contract, to say, we are going to prototype, but we're not moving to production. That's actually very crucial, and that has saved my butt a lot in the past. I used to think that human dependencies meant getting buy-in, right? You do all the legwork, you meet all the people, and everybody has said yes, right? With a different range of reluctance about how reluctantly they said yes. And you think you're all in the clear, but that's not the only human dependency, right? Because as you process through your project, you realize that certain people hold certain knowledge, certain people have certain tech, that they are, and only they have the ability to give that to you. Right? As a freelancer, I definitely run into that a lot, where I do not have the access to certain things, and there are a few bottlenecks where I have to go through. Thinking about that up front, especially in the scoping session, has helped a lot. Otherwise, I run into positions where I do data work, and after I sign the contract, I realize I do not have access to the data. Right. Then if you are, this has actually happened more than once, then if you are someone like me who I prefer to charge by the hour than charging by the entire contract, it's a sticky position, right? Do I or do I not bill for these hours when I'm running around talking to legal instead of talking to tech about getting data access? Usually I say I do not, because I don't think that's real data work, but it makes the relationship a little bit more complicated, right? I am using my time, but I'm not using it efficiently. But having this upfront done will help a lot. And lastly, I learned fifth one the hard way. Right? I forgot to ask this so many times because I just felt like people are ashamed of talking about their failures. Right? Not every company has the culture for postmortems, and it seems like something of shame where they want to sweep it under the carpet. Well, actually asking about this and saying, has this been done before? If it has, why has it failed? and learning from those mistakes. Right? Sometimes it's completely innocent. It's just somebody built this particular project before they have left, and we need somebody to pick this up. Sometimes it's like, we hit XYZ snag. Well, then we have to investigate if those snags have been untangled. Right? These are very basic knowledge. But I wanted to talk about my specific failures. Right. What I call scoping is Bayesian, so I have a math and stats background. If you are a frequentist, I've been told that fighting you is no longer fashionable, so I will abstain from that part. But before I talk about Bayesian for people who are not as familiar with the concept, do we have any video gamers in the room? Ooh, nice. Anybody who plays Nintendo? Yes. Okay. Gentleman in the back with the puffer jacket. What was the last game you finished?
Breath of the Wild.
Okay, Zelda, right? Breath of the Wild, Zelda. How many hours did it take you to finish that?
That's a big game. It's many hours.
Just a general number.
I don't know. 60 hours?
60, that's actually really fast.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't catch everything, so.
So 60 hours for Zelda for Breath of the Wild, right? This video game, let's pretend that I've never played this, which is not true. I've played it 3 times completion by now. But I haven't played this. I just bought Zelda. I'm holding on to it. I'm saying, how long should I budget for this, right? How many days do I have to take off work to finish this video game? And I could definitely go on game forums and say, well, what is the average completion rate? There are actually game forums that gives you that stat. But I think because you and I both develop in Python, I trust you more, so I'm going to go with your number. Right? So the concept of Bayesian is that if you have no information whatsoever, you kind of go with whatever's out there in public, which would be what the game boards are saying is the estimated number of hours. But if I have a more trusted source, I should go with that. If I actually played the game, and I said it took me 100 hours, I would discard the game board and I would discard your knowledge and say, okay, my last playthrough was actually 100. This time around, I know this game a lot better. It should be lower than 100. Maybe I'll go with 90. Right? So the concept of iteration with previous knowledge carries through in scoping. It is Bayesian, but very seldom do we think about these 2 things together. Because as we do the same project over and over again, we get better at it. Right? We get better, we get faster, we know where the pitfalls are. This is a great framework if only it worked. Right? I was a bit idealistic and naive about this. 2013, I was still working full-time and I was thinking about freelancing, right? Just dipping my toes in the water, very risk-averse. I didn't know if I should do this or not. So I said, let me keep my full-time job and let me pick up some project on the side to see how well it works out. I thought teaching for a boot camp would be very contained. Like video games, you and I, we buy the same video games, it's going to be the same experience. Teaching, you have the curriculum. Right? It must be the same thing over and over again. It must be something easy to scope. So I got in touch with the boot camp, and the boot camp says, you should talk to one of my previous instructors just to see how long it would take you to get ready. I talked to the instructor who ran the previous cohort, and he said, well, for every hour of lecture in class, I spend about 5 to 8 hours of prep outside of class. And I'm like, that's ludicrous. You must not be a good instructor. I didn't say that to his face. Right? I kind of thought that, and I walked away, and I told my content developer at the bootcamp, I said, this guy said 5 to 8 hours. Is that really true? And the content developer said, no, not at all, unless you're developing your own material. We have all the content, all the lecture slides, all the exercises done for you. You'll be fine. Right? So I discarded my prior. I did not go Bayesian, and I said, let's just go with how many hours of lecture there is in class and say that's how much time I need to spend on this. Keeping in mind 40 hours a week, right, full-time job. And then this was a boot camp that met twice a week, 3 hours each time, so 6 hours. 40 plus 60, that's doable. I started digging into the content. To the best of the intention of the person who made the content, I'm sure it made sense to them. It made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I ended up rewriting everything just because I can't teach off of somebody else's slides, right? So the 5 to 8 hours was actually true. In the basis when I had no information, I should have gone with somebody else's wisdom, not just say, it looks like it's okay. Somebody told me the work is done, right? So because it was my first iteration, I think it was more than 8. I think it was closer to 9. I'm a data geek, so I was keeping track of my hours. I think it was averaged out to about 9.6 hours of prep outside the class for 1 hour of teaching inside the class. I was burnt out before I even started freelancing. Right, after that particular bootcamp finished, I used my vacation days. I have a full-time job, and I said I need 2 weeks. I couldn't really explain why I was doing that, but I just needed 2 weeks. Right, a lot of freelance talk about burnout when they're actually 100% freelancing. I burned out. I was a overachiever. I burned out before I even started freelancing. And I don't think I should point fingers here. Right? Nobody's out to get me. Nobody was trying to make my experience very bad. I think it's just that the more hands there are touching a particular project, the human part is the hardest part to scope. Right? Not understanding that the person who taught is not the person who developed, and the person who's managing the course also didn't see the material. The more people there are in a project, it's not a linear relationship to variance, it's exponential. It does get better with practice though. Right, so I've been teaching boot camps, I've been lecturing at universities now. I think at this point I'm down to about 3 hours of prep time for 1 hour of lecture, especially if it's the same material. If it's different material, we start all over again. Secondly, maintenance projects, right? So we touched upon human factors in the previous one. Maintenance projects are one of the hardest ones in my experience to ever scope. Not because there are more people involved, but because you're inheriting something you did not write. I think us as a culture for development and for data, we reward the makers. We do not reward the maintainers. I know we're all here, but there's actually a maintainers conference at DC going on right now. I don't know if it's more of a therapy session or they're actually talking about anything. But I definitely see that in startups, right? We start and we build. We want to launch the product. But once we launch the product, we go back, somebody else looks at the code base, it's like, what is this duct tape? Actually, it's not even duct tape, this is masking tape. How is this holding together? And then we go back and we refactor. Yes, it means I have a job and I probably will always have a job. But at the same time, for me coming in, I don't really know what I'm inheriting. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do a maintenance job, I should stick with the simple ones, just like teaching. Right, so I picked up a project where 1, it was a client I worked with before. 2, I know their tech stack, not their tech debt. I also knew what their tech debt was like. And I go in and they say, well, we have an analyst who left, who wrote a kind of a stream of consciousness code on a Jupyter notebook for a Python model that we want to automate. And I'm seeing people who are just like recognizing where this is going almost. We want to move this into production, how bad can it be? And it's like, well, it's a predictive model, which is bread and butter for data people, right? And I know your tech stack, I know your cloud systems, everything you're using, so it should be fine. These were famous last words because after signing the contract, after going outside, I opened their Jupyter notebook. And the first thing I see is library, open parentheses, GLM net, close parentheses. Like, that's a little weird. I don't really know what GLM net is, but let's go on. Second line, library, open parentheses, ggplot2, close parentheses, WTF. What is ggplot2 doing in a Python script? That was the day I fully appreciated that Jupyter stands for Julia, Python, and R. So just because it's in the Jupyter notebook doesn't mean it's Python code. This person used RPy2 to write an R model and passed off as a Python model. So now I'm automating a R model that's not supported because the engineers in that company do not like R. To make it worse, GLMNet at that time was not supported in Python. There was no Python wrapper for this. So I actually had to rewrite a library that was written in R completely into Python. I ate the cost, right? I scoped, I told them this was gonna be X number of hours. It turned out to be 3 times that number of hours. I ate the extra 2 times hours. It was unpleasant for me. Not as bad as the first teaching one. Again, practice makes better, perfect. I was getting a little bit better about scoping. I gave myself a little bit of wiggle room. But after that particular project, what I told myself is that I will not say that scoping is over until I've actually read somebody's code. This is a bit unconventional, right? Especially for freelancers. Companies are very protective of their IP, their core IP in particular, and I understand that. But for me, it's like, unless I actually see the code, no matter how many promises you give me, I'm not going to say yes until actually signing the contract. So I compromise a little bit, right? So I talk to people, I say, I will sign all the NDAs. Right, I'll cite everything, the non-disclosure forms, I will not take your code or run away with it. I could even look over your shoulder just to see where the stage of this script is, but I will not actually give you an estimation of how long this would take until I actually see the code. I definitely had a client who says, that's the equivalent of saying, you're not gonna buy my pizza until I take a bite out of it. I'm like, yes, but I'll pay for that bite, in a way. Right? You just need a bit of a compromise. So at that point, I was set, right? I iterated. I don't start scoping until I've actually seen the code. I thought I was good. This was about a year after the previous project. I was falling into the pit hole of overscoping. A lot of my freelancer friends, they have these frameworks where they have 1 hour of free consulting, followed by everything else is charged. For me, it was not a quantitative solution. Right? So a lot of freelancer friends, these are designers, writers. It might work for them. It definitely didn't work for my business model, for better word of putting it, because 1 hour is not enough. I could barely get through the first 5, 6 questions I listed earlier for in the 1 hour. So I was actually doing a lot more free consulting up front. Well, this particular client, it was a tricky situation. It was a situation I've never encountered before. Let's just put it in a very vague way. Right, so I scoped. I met with them. I looked at the code, I poked at the code. I wrote pseudocode. I wrote RFPs, I wrote RFCs. I created entire Trello boards and Asana and GitHub issues. I also did Jira because they had 2 different teams. So one was using Jira, the other was using Trello. Let's not get to that. I did all of this up front and I presented this. I sent this all over to them. I said, okay, I am ready. Let's go. It was a Friday night. Freelancers don't really work regular hours. Friday night at around 11 p.m. So there was silence for the entire weekend. I said, okay, normal people have weekends. Maybe I shouldn't expect anything. I'll just follow up again on Monday. Nothing on Monday. I snoozed my inbox for a week. The Monday after that, I followed again. Basically, I never heard from this client ever again. I had not signed any contract. I had not even started invoicing because I didn't even know what the scoping decision was okay or not. I had a deliverable, right? I would count what I gave them to be work. But that was work that was unpaid for. So overscoping in our line of work, the mentality here is that it's not work, so it should be free. Here in New York City, we have a union for freelance. It's been active since 1995, but it's only been more famous recently in the last 2 or 3 years because it actually managed to pass a lot of legislation that protects the freelancers, and their logo is that freelancing is not free. It's a free union, so you could join in anytime you want. There's no union fee. But for them, freelancing is not free. But what they have not gotten to the point yet, which I challenge them to get to, is that scoping is not free. So I've shifted my process now where I've gone back to my friend's process. 1 hour of free consultation. Right? We get through the scoping problems as much as we possible. But after that, it's an hourly basis where I do charge for the scoping because scoping is work. This might seem incredibly unfair if you're here as an employer, right? And maybe up until the last story, you were thinking about maybe talking to me about a project, but after the last project, you say, no way, I'm not paying for scoping, you're backing out. But here's my last story, right? My last story is that it actually helps for the client's benefit as well. This was a client who said, we have a very specific need in the company where we want to upskill all of our analysts. Right? Our analysts are SQL analysts. We want them to be able to use Python. Can you come in and design an entire course for us? Right? This was about a higher end 4-digit number contract, as they proposed. I came in, I scoped, I met the people, I evaluated my students, my potential students for their background. I poked at their data to see what kind of data issues they actually have. At the end of 3 hours, I sat with my original point of contact. I said, you don't need me. I will give you a Google Doc of all these MOOCs, online courses that you could take, a blend of DataQuest, DataCamp, Coursera, University of Washington, right? Curated lessons that you need to take in this particular order, HackerRank. And that's all you need, because your need is not actually so unique that you need somebody to come in and design an entire course for you. So for them, it ended up being 3 hours of work to get this Google Doc instead of a 4-digit number to create an entire curriculum that they didn't actually need internally. And this last one, I counted as a failure because for me, from a business perspective, right, I talked myself out of a contract. So that's a fail boat on me. Thank you for listening. I could take any questions now, but if your boss is sitting next to you and you don't want to talk to me about freelancing, come talk to me afterwards. But thank you for coming. Any questions? Yes, question.
Have you or any folks you know ever done any pro bono work?
Oh, yes. So the sticker here is for Data Kind. Right, so they're one of the first ones who were taking volunteers who have a data background as well as a project management and developer background to do pro bono work. So I work a lot through them, but through them I also met a lot of nonprofits. So they have a call for volunteers next month. The way to get engaged with them is to go to their website and sign up for go through the application, but whether you actually get selected or not doesn't matter, just getting on their mail listserv so they know when the projects are available. Yeah, yes?
Do you have any advice about what projects to take in the beginning, especially as you're just getting started and you're trying to make some money, like combining short-term projects with long-term projects and so on?
So I still stand by the fact that I think picking up a teaching project was really good, not just because it was there weren't that many variances to begin with, but also because meeting people. So a lot of my students in the bootcamp actually ended up becoming my partners or my potential clients. I wasn't expecting that, but it was a very pleasant surprise. I have not had any luck with freelance platforms, right? So maybe somebody else had different experiences, but for me, things like Upwork, I think Upwork. What was the desk one? Odesk. Fiverr. They seem like a race to the bottom for me. Right? The price competition there is extremely high. But for me, my additional sell is that I know your data is private to you, so I come on site, so I travel. But I think for a lot of those platforms, people are remote, and you're competing against international people who have a different cost of living, which means they are willing to work for a lower rate. Question?
What's your opinion on down payments?
Like,
Down payments upfront,
I've definitely, so the question was, what's my opinion on down payments? The only thing that went into my mind was like, I'm not buying a house right now. I think it's feasible, but I don't have enough experience about that to say if that's a good idea or not. Yeah. Yes.
How about from the other side, from the company side?
Yeah.
What do you find are good practices for companies in managing freelancers as well?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood the question.
What, from the company side,
Yeah.
what do you think are good practices that companies can undertake to manage freelancers well? What's a good partner for you from the company that's hiring you perspective?
I think my favorite clients have been the ones who have worked with contractors before. So they are more forgiving if I'm not 100% on site at all times. If they are more respectful in my time in that, because they are working full-time jobs, right? Because so they could literally have emergency meetings anytime during the day. But for me, when I have multiple clients going on the go, I can't just hop on a call at the drop of a hat. And that's the part that's been a little bit, there's been a bit of contention going on where they said, prod is down, get on the call right now. Everybody's all hands. And I'm in the this actually happened last week. I was at the bottom of Grand Canyon. That was a little rough. Right, I try my best to give people in advance where my travel schedules are, but even then I know more clients, that means there's more houses on fire, there's more emergencies like that.
So being considerate, being understanding that
Yes.
that person is not a full-time employee.
Yes, that'd be very helpful. I don't think I have. I could probably take one last question if there's anybody who has questions. Could be anything. Well, thank you for coming.